The mansion was quiet in the afternoon, with only the faint sound of dishes clinking in the kitchen. She moved carefully, as if afraid of making any mistakes, her hands trembling slightly while wiping the counters. He watched from the doorway, leaning against the frame, noticing the way she flinched at even the smallest noises. Something felt off, a tension in her movements he could not ignore. Her sleeve was long, covering her arm in a way that looked deliberate. He saw a small shadow of something dark underneath the fabric. He stepped closer, his voice low but firm. "Are you hurt?" She froze instantly, pretending not to hear, her eyes darting away, refusing to meet his. He walked toward her, placing a hand on her shoulder. The moment his fingers brushed her skin, she pulled back slightly, instinctively, as though expecting pain to follow. He frowned, noticing the faint marks visible through her shirt, hidden by the sleeve, but impossible to miss. His chest tightened with anger and concern. She swallowed hard, her lips trembling. I'm fine," she whispered, but her voice lacked conviction. She tried to force a smile, but it faltered almost immediately. He studied her face carefully, noticing the way her eyes avoided his and how her body seemed smaller, tense, and ready to shrink at any moment. He crouched slightly to be on her level. "Show me your arm," he said softly. She hesitated, looking around as if someone might see, but finally lifted her sleeve. Dark bruises spread across her forearm, some deep, some faded, telling stories of pain and fear she had lived with silently for too long. Anger rose in him, hot and sharp, but he kept his voice calm. "Who did this to you?" She shook her head violently. "No one. It's nothing. I'm fine," she said, but her voice broke, betraying the lies she spoke to protect someone she thought she should. He stood, towering over her, but without threat. "You're not fine, and I won't let anyone hurt you. Not here. Not ever." Her eyes welled up, and for the first time, she felt a strange mix of fear, relief, and the faintest hint of hope. He knew he had to act, and he was already forming plans to make sure she would never have to hide like this again. He called one of his trusted men and instructed him to ensure her safety immediately. While arrangements were being made, she sat quietly, still trembling. She wasn't used to someone reacting like this, someone who didn't shout at her, question her, or dismiss her fear. He stayed nearby, silent but attentive, letting her know she wasn't alone. Finally, he sat beside her, careful not to invade her space. "No one will hurt you anymore," he said, his tone gentle but full of authority. "I'll handle this." She wanted to believe him, but she had spent too many nights hiding bruises, crying alone, and convincing herself it was normal. She finally spoke, her voice small. "I can't go back. If they find out, it will be worse." His face darkened, and he clenched his fist subtly, suppressing the anger that roared in his chest. "Then we won't let them find you," he said. "You're not going back there. Ever." The first arrangements were made for her to stay in a secure, undisclosed location. He personally ensured it was safe, checking every detail, down to the locks and security cameras. She was still scared, but the thought of leaving the mansion with his protection gave her a strange, unexpected comfort. Before she left, he handed her a phone. "If anything happens, you call me immediately. No exceptions. Do you understand?" She nodded, gripping the device as though it was a lifeline. He studied her closely, seeing the deep exhaustion in her eyes, the weight of fear she had carried silently for years. As she walked away, she looked back once. His eyes followed her, filled with concern and determination. She felt a strange warmth in her chest, something she hadn't felt in a long time. Trust. She didn't fully understand it yet, but the feeling was powerful. He returned to the mansion, pacing quietly. His mind was already planning the next steps. He would find out who hurt her, make sure they could never touch her again, and slowly help her heal. No one in his world would get in the way of that promise. The next day, he observed the mansion carefully. He noticed the way the other staff members looked at her with thinly veiled curiosity, whispering among themselves. He knew some of them must have seen the bruises too. His eyes narrowed. Anyone who had anything to do with her suffering would regret it. Meanwhile, she stayed hidden, adjusting to the unfamiliar safe house. It was small, but clean and well kept. The quiet allowed her to breathe without fear. She began to realize she had spent too long hiding, protecting herself from the world instead of living. He called one of his closest allies. Find out everything. Who could have done this? Who has access to my household? No one can be spared scrutiny. He wasn't just angry. He was determined. No one would ever harm her under his watch. Back at the safe house, she sat on the bed, staring at her bruises. The pain was still there, but it no longer felt like a sentence. She realized someone finally cared, someone powerful enough to make sure nothing like this happened again. He sent one of his men to check on her daily, bringing food, talking to her, making sure she knew she wasn't alone. Slowly, she began to speak more, revealing small pieces of her life, pieces she had hidden even from friends. When he finally arrived to see her, she flinched at first, but he knelt down, speaking softly. I'm here. You don't have to hide anymore. She felt tears prick her eyes. No one had ever said that to her with such certainty. They spent hours just talking. She shared some of the fear she had carried for years. He listened, never judging, only offering comfort. She started to see that she didn't need to be afraid anymore, not while he was around. He decided to bring her back to the mansion, but under strict conditions. Only trusted people could see her. He instructed the staff to respect her space and never question her about the past. The mansion, usually cold and intimidating, became a place where she could start to feel safe. Returning to the mansion was overwhelming for her. Every corner reminded her of fear and pain, but he was always nearby, guiding her, making sure she felt in control. He didn't rush her. He let her set the pace, letting her regain confidence in her surroundings. She noticed him observing her constantly, not with suspicion, but with care. It made her heart ache, a strange feeling of warmth mixing with her fear. For the first time, she realized she was being protected, valued, and seen. At night, he checked her room personally, ensuring locks were secure and that she had what she needed. She felt safe enough to sleep, but not fully. Trust was new to her, and old habits of fear were hard to break. One evening, he confronted the staff. His voice was cold and sharp. If anyone hurts her, there will be consequences. Understand? The room fell silent. Everyone knew he meant it. She overheard him, hidden in the shadows. Her chest swelled with gratitude and relief. She had never felt so protected in her life. Over the next few days, he worked tirelessly to find the people responsible for her bruises. His methods were quiet but effective. Rumors spread that anyone who harmed someone in his household would face his wrath. She began to feel the world shift around her, her fear slowly fading. The next morning, she awoke to a soft knock on the door. One of his men, loyal and discreet, brought breakfast and a small stack of folded clothes. She realized he had thought of everything, her comfort, her privacy, her safety. Each thoughtful gesture made her feel more alive, more seen than she had in years. He arrived shortly after, quietly entering the room. His eyes scanned her carefully, not with suspicion, but with concern. "You slept well?" he asked, his voice gentle. She nodded, feeling a mix of relief and guilt. Relief that he cared, guilt for letting someone else see her weakness. "You don't have to hide anymore," he said, sitting across from her. She looked at him, unsure how to respond. She had spent so long pretending to be strong, pretending not to hurt. That vulnerability felt foreign and dangerous. Yet his presence made it feel safe. The day passed slowly, filled with small moments of trust. He watched her carefully, noticing the way she moved, the way her hands shook when she carried things. He began to teach her subtle ways to defend herself, ways to feel empowered. Each lesson reminded her that she was no longer helpless. Late in the afternoon, he received a call and stepped outside, leaving her to think quietly. She looked at the bruises on her arms, fading but still visible, and wondered how long it would take to feel whole again. She realized she had hope for the first time in years. When he returned, his face was dark. "I found out who did this," he said, his voice low and dangerous. She tensed, afraid of what he might do, afraid that the violence would come back to her. Instead, He took her hand and squeezed it gently. "You don't need to be afraid anymore. I'll handle everything. You just focus on healing." For the first time, she truly believed him. Over the next few days, the mansion buzzed with quiet activity. He tightened security, personally supervising every entrance and exit. Staff who had been careless or unkind were quietly, but firmly warned. The message was clear. Anyone who hurt her would pay dearly. She began to explore the mansion more freely, noticing the little details she had ignored before. He allowed her to move at her own pace, never forcing her into spaces or situations she wasn't ready for. Each step she took without fear was a small victory, a testament to his protection. One evening, as they walked through the garden, he asked her about her past life, carefully, gently. She hesitated, then started to tell fragments of her story. She spoke of her struggles, the fear, the nights she cried alone. He listened silently, letting her speak without interruption, offering comfort with his presence. She realized how much she had bottled inside. Speaking aloud, even small pieces, lifted weight she didn't know she had carried. He didn't rush her or demand details. He simply allowed her to exist without judgment. As the days passed, he began to teach her small things about the household, managing the inventory, supervising other staff. She noticed a sense of pride rising in her chest. She was learning, gaining confidence, and feeling useful. Late one night, she woke to find him standing by her door, quietly checking on her. His eyes softened when he saw her awake. "Sleep now," he said simply. She nodded, feeling safer than ever before. Even in the quiet moments, she began to notice subtle changes within herself. The fear was still there, but it no longer consumed her. With him, she felt seen, valued, and slowly alive. Rumors began to spread outside the mansion about the fate of the people who had harmed her. He had made it clear that anyone involved in her suffering would face consequences. The fear that he inspired kept her enemies at bay, though she did not fully understand the extent of his reach. Meanwhile, she began to form small bonds with a few trusted staff members. He encouraged her gently, teaching her that she could rely on others without fear. Each friendly interaction felt strange but comforting, a reminder that she was part of a world that could be kind. One afternoon, a delivery arrived. Inside was a carefully packed set of medicines and ointments for her bruises. He had anticipated her needs before she even asked. She stared at the package, overwhelmed by the thoughtfulness and care behind it. She began to notice small changes in herself. She no longer flinched at every sound, and she started to smile again. The fear that had ruled her life for so long began to loosen its grip, replaced by a cautious optimism. He spent hours with her each day, helping her regain confidence and teaching her how to navigate the mansion safely. It wasn't just protection, it was empowerment, and she felt herself growing stronger under his guidance. One evening, as they watched the sunset from the balcony, he placed a hand over hers. "You're doing better," he said softly. She nodded, tears pricking her eyes, realizing that for the first time in years, someone truly cared for her well-being. She started to imagine a future where fear no longer ruled her, where she could live without hiding. And though the past still haunted her, she felt a small flame of hope, fueled by his unwavering presence. The mansion grew busier as he expanded security even further. He made sure no one could enter or leave unnoticed. She watched him move with authority, realizing just how powerful he was and how deeply he cared about her safety. He began teaching her self-defense in secret, showing her simple ways to protect herself. At first, she resisted, unsure of her own strength, but his patience and encouragement slowly built her confidence. Meanwhile, she began to open up about her fears, sharing little stories about the people who had hurt her and the situations she had endured. He listened, never interrupting, never judging, letting her unload years of suppressed emotion. The mansion became a place of quiet recovery. She started to sleep better, eat better, and even laugh a little. Though she still saw the bruises in the mirror, they no longer defined her. He arranged for her to have lessons in reading and writing, skills she had been denied in her past life. Each small accomplishment made her feel empowered and capable, and she saw him watching her with quiet pride. One night, a storm raged outside, and she was frightened. He held her close, whispering reassurances until her trembling stopped. It was a simple act, but it carried the weight of safety and trust. For the first time, she felt like she had a future beyond fear, a place where she could be herself, without constant worry. She was learning to live again, slowly but surely, under his careful guidance. He began investigating quietly outside the mansion. Friends, contacts, and informants were questioned. He needed to know who had allowed harm to come to her and why. She noticed him becoming more tense, more determined, but he never let his worry show directly to her. She spent her days exploring the mansion more freely, learning small household tasks and interacting with staff under his watchful eye. Every day, she grew a little stronger, a little more confident, and a little more willing to trust. One afternoon, a letter arrived with threats against her. She froze, fear surging back, but he was immediately at her side. His presence calmed her, and he promised swift retaliation, showing her that he would protect her at any cost. She began to notice small gestures from him, a hand brushing hers accidentally, a look that lingered too long, but she didn't question them. Right now, she needed only to feel safe. He started to share stories of his own past, carefully selected to show her that even powerful people had vulnerabilities. She realized that he wasn't just her protector. He was someone who understood pain and had chosen to care for her anyway. They spent long evenings in quiet companionship. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they simply sat together. She felt the weight of her past slowly lifting, replaced by a cautious, growing trust. She began to imagine a life where fear no longer dominated her every action. The bruises on her arms would fade, but the memory of this protection, this care, would remain, a foundation on which she could rebuild herself. The mansion became a sanctuary. He enforced strict rules, ensuring that she could move freely, without fear of being watched or judged. She realized that safety could exist, and that she could survive in a world she had once thought cruel and unrelenting. He began to train her in small ways to manage her own safety and independence, from locking doors to understanding household patterns. Each lesson gave her confidence, and she noticed herself standing taller, moving more freely. The bruises were healing slowly, and he brought ointments and treatments daily. He didn't rush her recovery, understanding that healing was as much emotional as physical. She began to look forward to these small care routines, feeling valued for the first time. He quietly investigated her past, learning who had hurt her and why. When he shared small victories, people held accountable, threats neutralized. She felt a sense of relief and awe at his ability to protect her. One afternoon, she accidentally cut herself while cooking. He appeared instantly, treating the wound and scolding gently. She laughed nervously, realizing she hadn't been able to do something so ordinary without fear for years. She began to take small walks around the property with him, learning that freedom and trust could coexist. The once intimidating mansion now felt like a protective cocoon, a place where she could grow stronger without fear. As the night settled, he stood outside her room for a moment, watching over her. She fell asleep knowing that, no matter what, someone powerful, caring, and unwavering would always keep her safe.